1967, University of Pennsylvania. A psychologist gave dogs electric shocks, and by accident, he made one of the most important discoveries in the history of psychology. Martin Seligman exposed dogs to mild electric shocks they couldn't escape. Later, he placed them in a box divided by a low barrier they could easily jump over. On the other side, there were no shocks. Most of the dogs never jumped. They lay down. They accepted the shocks. They didn't even stand up to test the freedom that was only 3 steps away. Seligman called this learned helplessness. But during the same experiment, he noticed something even more interesting. 1/3 of the dogs never gave up. They experienced the exact same shocks, the same conditions, the same box, but they jumped. And that difference, why some collapse while others don't, kept Seligman searching for answers over the next 30 years. It's true for you too. What he found wasn't just true for dogs. Those dogs weren't stupid. They weren't weak. They had simply learned one thing. No matter what you do, nothing changes. And that lesson became so powerful that even when real freedom appeared, they didn't believe it. Freedom was there, just 3 steps away. But the brain ignored it. Seligman tested the same idea on humans. He first gave people impossible puzzles to solve. Then he gave them puzzles that were actually solvable. The group that started with the impossible puzzles gave up much sooner, even on the solvable ones. Their intelligence hadn't changed. The puzzles hadn't changed. Only one thing had changed. Their brains had reached a conclusion. Trying is pointless. This isn't something that only happens in laboratories. The person who goes to the same job every morning gets the same disappointing results and eventually stops trying experiences it. The person who quits every diet after failing again and again experiences it. The person who stays trapped in the same relationship patterns until they finally say, "This is just who I am," experiences it. Learned helplessness becomes a real psychological trap. But Seligman had also noticed something else in that dog experiment. 1/3 of the dogs never gave up. So what made them different? The answer is much simpler than you think, and much more uncomfortable. Because the difference wasn't in their genes. It wasn't in their intelligence. It wasn't luck. It was their explanation. Seligman discovered something remarkable. The issue isn't what happens to you. The issue is how you explain it. He called this your explanatory style. Whenever something bad happens, every person explains it along 3 dimensions. The first is permanence. A pessimist says, "This is how it's always going to be." An optimist says, "This time it didn't work." The exact same failure, 2 completely different perceptions of time. The second is pervasiveness. A pessimist says, "I can't do anything right." An optimist says, "I struggled with this particular thing." One person lets a single event spread across their entire life. The other keeps it contained. The third is personalization. A pessimist says, "It's my fault, I'm not good enough." An optimist says, "The circumstances were difficult, something went wrong." Notice something. This isn't about avoiding responsibility. Seligman was talking about carrying responsibility without destroying yourself in the process. Now make it concrete. 2 people lose their jobs on the same day. One thinks, "I'm a failure. It'll always be like this. My whole life is ruined." The other thinks, "This position wasn't the right fit for me. I'll make a better choice next time." The same event. 2 completely different brains. And over the next 6 months, those 2 brains produce completely different outcomes. But is explanatory style fixed? Or can it change? Seligman's answer was clear. It can change. And to prove it, he went to one of the largest insurance companies in the world. So, 1985, New York. MetLife, one of the world's largest insurance companies. And they had a serious problem. Half of their salespeople quit within their first 2 years. Because selling insurance is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Every day doors slam in your face. Every day you hear dozens of no's. MetLife called Seligman. He asked them a simple question. Do you have applicants who failed your standard hiring test but scored highly in optimistic explanatory style? They did, 129 of them. Seligman made a recommendation. Hire them anyway, track them as a separate group. 2 years later, the results came in. Those 129 people, the ones who had failed the standard hiring test and, according to the system, should never have been hired, outperformed the traditionally selected salespeople by 57%. 57%? The same company, the same products, the same customers. The only difference was explanatory style. A salesperson with a pessimistic explanatory style hears one rejection and thinks, "I'm not good enough. This job isn't for me." Slowly, they stop knocking on doors. A salesperson with an optimistic explanatory style hears the exact same rejection and thinks, The timing wasn't right. I'll try the next one. And they keep knocking. The same door, the same rejection, two completely different futures. But in what area of your life have you stopped knocking on doors? But Seligman didn't stop there. In 2011, he proposed something bigger. Success isn't built on one thing. It's built on 5 pillars. He called it PERMA. The first is positive emotion. But pay attention. He's not saying be happy all the time. Research by Barbara Fredrickson showed that people experiencing positive emotions broaden their attention. They see more possibilities. They generate more creative solutions. Feeling good isn't just pleasant, it directly improves how your brain performs. The second is engagement. What psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called flow. That state where time disappears, where you're completely absorbed. The challenge isn't too easy. It isn't too difficult. It's exactly at your edge. Research shows that people who experience flow regularly are both more productive and more resilient. The third is relationships. The Harvard study of adult development, running since 1938, the longest longitudinal study of human life ever conducted. For more than 80 years, researchers followed hundreds of people. Its conclusion fits into one sentence. The people who lived the longest and healthiest lives weren't the richest. They weren't the smartest. They were the ones with the strongest relationships. The fourth is meaning. Working for something larger than yourself dramatically increases psychological resilience. Viktor Frankl observed this in Nazi concentration camps. The people who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest. They were the ones who found meaning. The fifth is accomplishment. Not only major achievements, small, concrete, consistent completions. Every completed task releases dopamine in the brain, and that dopamine becomes fuel for the next step. When these 5 elements come together, Seligman calls it flourishing. Not simply being happy, but truly thriving. Still, knowing all of this isn't enough, because inside your brain there's a much older, much stronger system that can sabotage every one of these things. And it's working right now. 1998. Martin Seligman became president of the American Psychological Association. And when he stepped onto the stage that year, he said something unexpected. Psychology has been asking the wrong question. For 100 years, psychology had asked, how do we fix what's wrong with people? Seligman asked a different question. How do we strengthen what's right with people? It sounds like a small difference. It isn't. If you constantly ask someone, what's wrong with you? Their brain grows in that direction. If you ask, what's strong about you? The opposite happens. Seligman tested this idea. He divided people into 2 groups. The first group was asked to write down 3 good things that happened every night before bed and why those things happened. The second group did nothing. 1 month later, he measured the results. The people who practiced the 3 good things exercise were significantly happier, and the effect was still there 6 months later. One habit, 5 minutes every night. Why would something that simple have such a powerful effect? Because the human brain evolved to focus on threats. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. Negative information is processed up to 5 times more strongly than positive information. Imagine this. You receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism during a meeting. Which one follows you home? 100 things go right today. 3 go wrong. Which ones are you thinking about when you're lying in bed tonight? That filter, a negativity filter up to 5 times stronger, quietly shapes almost every decision you make. Seligman's simple exercise was designed to target exactly that, to recalibrate your brain's attentional system. By deliberately writing down 3 good things every night, you're not denying the problems. You're retraining your brain to see the full picture. Go back to that dog experiment. 2/3 of the dogs collapsed. Freedom was only 3 steps away, but they never tried. 1/3 jumped. For 30 years, Seligman searched for what separated that 1/3 from the rest. His answer was this. They weren't born different. They weren't stronger. They weren't smarter. They simply explained their experiences differently. This shock is temporary. This shock doesn't affect everything. This shock doesn't define me. 3 sentences, and those 3 sentences changed everything. Is there a door you've stopped knocking on? Something you've given up trying? An area where you've quietly decided this isn't for me? After 1 failure? After 1 disappointment? After 1 painful experience? Right now, your brain is probably telling you, it will always be like this. This is my whole life. This is who I am. But Seligman's 30 years of research says something different. That isn't reality. It's a learned explanation. And everything that can be learned again. Back in 1998, standing on that stage, Seligman said psychology had been asking the wrong question. Maybe you've been asking yourself the wrong question too. Not, why can't I succeed? But, how am I explaining this to myself? Because your brain has a filter. The real question is, are you controlling that filter? Or is that filter controlling you?